And with us, we have other distinguished guests. Thank you all for coming. This is our annual meeting to discuss the budget and the town warrant. And with that opening salvo, I will hand it over to our town administrator, Andy Sheehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the Chair stated, this meeting is really the preview for the annual and the special town meeting. We have a special town meeting this year consisting of 3 articles that I'll get into shortly, as well as the typical annual town meeting, fairly long annual warrant that we'll try to go through quickly tonight. In talking with the Chair, it seems that it would make sense in light of the number of articles that we have for me to just sort of summarize what's in the article, and if there's a desire on the part of anybody to talk in more depth about it, we can sort of treat it like a consent item and just yell out or throw something at me, and we can talk in more depth about it. So
something soft though, because we need him around.
So first of all, I'd like to extend my thanks to all of the officials and department heads and employees for their recognition of the situation that we're facing this year. It's a tough budget year that we've been embarking on over the last several months, and the reasons for that will become clear if they're not already. And especially like to thank Ryan Ferrara and Nicole McGee for their work in all of the budget work and projection work that's been going on, both on the operations budget and the capital budget. So in terms of the operating budget, as I said, a very challenging year facing us this year. Like most communities in Massachusetts, with the exception of some unusually lucky ones, we have pretty flat revenues. We'll show some of that tonight as we go through these slides in terms of the state aid, the flat state aid that we've been dealing with for, I think we show it back to about 2010. You can go back to even further than that and see that we're quite below where we were in 2008, 2009 by several $100,000, and so that just contributes to the challenges that we face. We have very little control over certain major cost centers, health insurance and retirement. We hear that everywhere. You've heard it here in the past. Those are growing at far above 2.5%, far above any consumer price index. And then really the big ones are the regional school assessments. And I'll spend a little bit more time on that right now. We had 3 failed overrides last year, last May. 2 for regional schools, 1 for the local schools. The local schools were able to meet that obligation and reduce their budgets. The regional schools' budgets were approved by at least a majority of the cities and towns that are in those regions. Therefore, even though Middleton did not support the override, did not pass the override, we still had to make up for our share of that assessment. So we'll be doing that in the special town meeting that will take place at the beginning of the annual, or just before the annual meeting, and we'll be doing that out of free cash. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. I had the opportunity to watch last year's warrant meeting online, and at that time, Ira Singer talked about the impact of the overrides, or the need for the overrides, the impact of the school assessments. Said that the regional assessments are not optional. We have to fund them one way or the other. And the question that he posed at that time was, do you do that within the budget, or do you do that with the benefit of an override? He also talked about building capacity for the future, and obviously the failed overrides affect our ability to build capacity. So So with that as background, a little bit of sort of catch up to where we are today. The Essex Tech and the Masco school assessments, we are unable to fully pay our assessments for both the regional districts. We've paid a portion of those assessments. We don't have enough appropriated to pay the entire assessment. So that's why we'll be talking about that in the special town meeting warrant about funding those assessments. Those appropriations will be coming out of free cash, which is not really ideal, not the way you want to fund your operating budget, but we don't have a lot of options. So, the hole that creates in our revenue stream and our model doesn't go away. Even though we fill it with free cash, that number carries forward to the next year, compounded by Proposition 2.5. So the longer we wait before we fix that, the further behind that we get. So the total operating budget right now is about $32.5 million. Represents just under a $2 million change, or 6.5% change over fiscal 16. On the town side, it's just under 5% increase. The difference is made up in the Masco assessment primarily and retirement assessment. And we've talked about those in the all-day budget meetings. We won't dwell too much on retirement tonight, but we'll talk about some of the other elements of that. So, so we pulled together a working group that met last week, consisting of Costa Prentakis, Brian Cresta, John Erickson, and Richard Gregorio, myself, and Nicole McGee, and spent a few hours trying to figure out what the best approach is to fixing the problem that we have and coming up with a message for the support of the override, and really coming up with what the amount should be. And we settled on a preliminary amount of $690,000 for the override, and we'll talk about that as we go through the evening tonight. And part of that is the majority of that is to address the issues that we face in 17, and then the other part of it is getting back to the comments that Ira Singer made last year about building capacity for the future years. Obviously, whenever we talk about an override, the logical next question is, well, what happens if we don't fund it? And we'll have some details on that, but there'll be impacts, significant impacts to the elementary schools, to the fire and police departments, and to some other non-public safety departments, and we've got some more details on that. Again, we have no control over the two regional schools, assuming that those budgets are approved by at least half of the member communities, and that's what we expect. So we don't have any real control over Masco or over Essex Tech. So changing direction a little bit, talking about the capital budget. One of the things that was clear to me during the interview and recruitment process before I was brought on was the town's commitment to capital budgeting and investing in its infrastructure. We understand the need to do that, to continue to reinvest in our buildings and grounds and vehicles and things like that. We are not deviating from that, but we will offer up some options in terms of deferring some of those as a reflection of the issues that we're facing in the operating side of the budget. One of the thoughts that we had was that if we defer some of these in the spring and we're successful with the override, we could come back in the fall with a special town meeting and reinsert those deferred items. So I think it's a prudent approach. makes sense in the environment that we're working under this year. So, in the warrants that I emailed out to everybody in the last day or two, there were a number of shaded areas, and those I left that in there intentionally for the board members to draw their attention to those. There are some items that we need to that the board needs to make some decisions on. Some of them are the capital items that I talked about that we might want to consider deferring, and a couple of other things that are not are somewhat related to the capital items that we need to talk about. So, as I said, we have a lot of articles, and we still have a little bit of time to make some substantive changes to the warrants, and whether that's tonight or at the meeting next week. But we expect to send everything off to the printer in about 2 weeks. So time is kind of running down on us. So with that, I'll jump into the special town meeting warrant, if that's okay with the chair. I did talk to the moderator beforehand, and she suggested or reminded me that in the past, when there has been a special, it has typically started at 7:25 with the annual starting at 7:30. So if that's the pleasure of everyone, we'll go forward with that and make that change.
Okay.
Yeah. So
assuming we have a quorum at 7:25.
Correct. Always the challenge. So in the special town meeting warrant, we have 3 articles. The first one is a sort of a standing article that most cities and towns have, and Middleton has had probably every year, and that is to fund any deficit in winter operations, snow and ice removal. Right now, we don't expect to have to take any action on that unless something really remarkable happens in the next 6 weeks or so. We should come in under budget on snow and ice. Right now, we're about $75,000 in the black, so we're in good shape there. Articles 2 and 3 have to do with our regional assessments for the current fiscal year. This goes back to my earlier comment that we don't have the appropriation to meet our assessments at this time. So Article 2 is a supplemental appropriation for the Masconomet assessment for the current fiscal year in the amount of $287,939. We expect that we would suggest that be paid out of free cash, as I mentioned earlier, and this would complete the funding for Masconomet for the current fiscal year. Article 3 is the supplemental appropriation to complete the funding for Essex Tech, and that is in the amount of $117,845. And again, it's essentially the same story with both of those. That we have a legal obligation under the regional agreements to make those payments, but we don't have a legal appropriation at this point to make them. So, if there's any questions on the special, I'm open to that. Otherwise, I'll jump into the annual if the chair is okay. Teresa?
Maybe can I just ask a question? So if we have some meeting and a question comes up, I'm just going to throw it out now. Who is responding to the question is my question.
I think that in terms of the question,
If anybody,
why do we have to pay it? Or,
yes, exactly.
I'm happy to answer that question.
Okay.
It's more the town's obligation than it is Masco's obligation at this point, and so I'm happy to address the legal reasons that we have to answer it, or town council. Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll dive in and
Let's get going.
I'll try to talk fast for a change. Article 1 is to hear and act on committee reports. Article 2 is a standard article authorizing the treasurer to borrow money throughout the course of the year. Article 3 is the consolidated personnel plan. And again, if there's any questions, just yell out. I may have my eyes down, so I may not see if you stick your hand up. Article 3 is the consolidated personnel plan that we'll be finalizing after we get through all the exercises tonight and in the coming days.
And that will list non-union personnel salaries as, okay.
Yep, that's correct. That's correct. Article 4 is the omnibus budget for 17. I'll talk about 4 and 5 together. 5 is the what we might call the supplemental appropriation article, or contingent appropriation article. It would be the override article, and so that would be so the omnibus budget would be what we've identified, the $32.5 million minus the amount of the override. And then in Article 5, Article 5 would have, in the sum line, it would have the override amount. The article has to reflect what would be funded if the override passes. So that will be fleshed out as we go through. Article 6 is an adoption of a statute to authorize the collection of a supplemental local meals tax. We estimate, or the Department of Revenue estimates, that would result in roughly an additional $200,000 coming into Middleton. That would go into effect expected to go into effect in July.
And I think I see the purpose here, and it's pretty clear. I think it should also be stated, because it's reflected in our revenue plan, that for year one of such a adoption, DOR doesn't allow us to anticipate a full 100% revenue.
Right. So in the time that it takes the DOR to collect and then turn the money back to us is about a 2-month lag. So in the first year, we can only count on 10 months worth of revenue. In all of the succeeding years, we can count on the full 12 months. So in the first year, it's $166,000.
So,
But none of that is built into our revenue projection.
That's correct.
We're expecting zero. We're anticipating it to fail, so it won't cause a problem if it does fail. But if we do pass it, that will end up in free cash likely, and then it'll allow us to have a little bit extra capacity down the road.
would it make sense to place that into a special town meeting, which would, if there is a 2-month backlog of DOR being able to reconcile and return to us those dollars, that special town meeting at its close of it in May would allow probably a month to a month and a half earlier enactment?
I don't think that makes, a difference, because it's, the adoption is up on the same date. The DOR needs the lead time to tell whether it's in the special or the annual. It doesn't go into effect until July 1st.
Right, so it's,
Okay.
we have to give them at least 30 days' notice, and it can only start on a fiscal quarter.
Got it. Okay.
So it wouldn't have an effect. So that, and we'll talk a little bit more about what John mentioned in terms of building capacity. We'll see later on the expected effects of Essex Tech in the future years as our enrollment continues to grow there. So we'll touch on that again down the road. Article 7 is the Community Preservation Committee article. And Costa, I don't know if you want to talk about this or let it speak for itself, or?
Well, it's the standard, article that's, in the budget, every year. It funds the obligations of the Community Preservation Committee. And if you're really interested in learning all about the CPA and its effects on Middleton, the Council on Aging, as part of its weekly speaker series, is hosting a talk on the Community Preservation Act, which I'll be giving in this room next Thursday at 6:30.
Could be on DVR.
He'll be live.
That's the 1,100 admin expense, right?
Article 8 is a standard reauthorization. Oh, sorry, George.
Yeah, I noticed that it lists A, B, and C, and D as for the budget. And in the body, it lists debt service for the Hagan property, which doesn't show up in the budget.
Oh,
That's been
right.
paid. It's been paid off. That's why it's not there.
Or perhaps the Hagan property should be deleted from the purpose of the explanation.
Correct.
Good eye, George.
Okay, Article 8 is an annual reauthorization of revolving funds for firearms, council on aging, recreation, recreation field use, and stormwater management revolving funds. The amounts, the authorized amounts are the same as they were last year. The next handful of articles are recommended by Town Accountant Nicole McGee. Some of them are new statutory adoptions. Some of them are just practices that we believe that it is a good idea to implement. Helps some of our accounting practices as we go forward. The first one, Article 9, is a revolving fund for backflow prevention, backflow connections. This is an annual inspection that has to happen for certain properties connected to the public water supply. And so this would allow us to segregate those fees and use them without having to wait for a town meeting appropriation. That if it gets adopted, it would become part of what we just approved or just saw in Article 8, which is the reauthorization of revolving accounts. Article 10 is a statutory adoption, allows us to accelerate and streamline the process for dispensing with or just getting rid of, getting off the books of what we refer to as tailings. Tailings are checks that we issue that, for whatever reason, go uncashed. They could be payroll checks, vendor checks, any number of things. So the process under the statute is fairly cumbersome. This would allow us to pursue a more streamlined approach to getting rid of those. Article 11 is setting up a receipts reserve for appropriation account for PEG access. PEG is public education and government. It's the cable franchise fees that we bring in from Comcast and Verizon. So this would put those fees into a separate account. They're limited in what they can be used for, and then as part of the budget, we would draw from that as a revenue source, and we've done that for the budget year coming up. So just sort of cleans up the process a little bit, and it's a recommended practice by the Department of Revenue. Article 12 on page 8 is an article to set up the sewer department as an enterprise, so it'd be set up as a business operation in the way that all enterprise accounts are. So the money that they collect would fund their operations. Article 13 related to that is the operating budget for the sewer operation. All of it paid for $118,695, paid out of department receipts to fund the operation. Article 14 is really continues the town's practice of aggressively collecting monies that are due to us. This establishes due dates and interest provisions for unpaid municipal charges, in addition to things like property tax, which are carried under or covered under the general laws. Article 15 is a lien provision for unpaid sewer charges and allows us to treat unpaid sewer charges as a lien on the property. makes it easier for us to collect those unpaid fees at the time of sale. 16 is in response to a citizen petition by the abutters of Old 100 Lane. We have a bylaw on the books that allows for the abutters of a private way to ask for the town to share in the cost of improving that way. And 2/3 of the abutters is the requirement under the bylaw. The residents have got that. Cost to the town is $23,500 out of the total cost of $47,000. So, and that's reflected in the capital plan as well. Article 17 has to do with Natsu Way, and it's a required cleanup of property at Natsu Way in the amount estimated at $165,000. Mass contingency plan is referenced in the article. That's the portion of the general laws that deals with environmental pollution that generally referred to as contamination that we would have to that we are on the hook for cleaning up. So no matter what we do with Natsu Way, there was talk until recently about developing Natsu Way, developing the recreation area there. The board has voted to defer that till next year. With or without the recreation project, we're responsible for the cleanup on Natsu, and that's what this would fund. Article 18 is sort of related to that. It would grant authorization to, or authority to the Board of Selectmen to acquire a certain parcel of land owned by Natsu Realty Trust. It is a parcel that we have cleanup responsibilities or cleanup obligations on. So whether we own it or not, we have those obligations. So it would behoove us to acquire the property. It would also, at the time that we, in the future, that we get to go and develop Natsu Way as a recreation area, it would be beneficial to us. This is a mock-up that an engineering firm did for us, showing roughly what we could do there in terms of parking spaces. 54 spaces there. We probably wouldn't lay it out quite like that, but give you a sense of what the capacity is on that parcel. Article 19 is authorization for the board to accept an easement from Cumberland Farms. Cumberland Farms is being redeveloped, the one right across the street, being redeveloped, and they have agreed to build a walking path that would tie into the Henry Traggart Common and the walking paths there. So they would grant us an easement, and this just gives the Board of Selectmen the authorization to accept that easement. The next several pages, many pages, are capital appropriation articles, and I'll go through that, try to go through that fairly quickly. Article 20 is $95,000 to pay for the next phase of the streetlight conversion project, converting the Cobra heads to LED.
I actually think it would make sense in this, as we do some purposes and summaries, of including what we anticipate in our discussions with MELD would be in a reduction of the cost of what we pay annually for the lights. So, we talked about this previous town meeting when we started the investment in LED lights, and I would assume most people are starting to see the effects of that. You can tell which one are LEDs compared to the previous. But I think it's important to also show them that this second and final investment, that we're actually starting to see real reductions in the cost of powering those lights.
Right, and we've reduced our streetlight budget in anticipation of the savings that we're going to see from this conversion project. Article 21 is the first of the articles that we need to have a little conversation about if we want to start tailing back or dialing back some of the capital appropriations in light of the challenges facing the operating budget. This is a request from the DPW director for $9,000 for building and deck repairs at the transfer station and $8,000 for new tires on a loader. He doesn't believe we have much of an option on the loader. We need new tires. It's a 2005, still has the original tires on it. So I don't think we can complain too much about 11 years for a set of tires. But the other one, the shaded portion, the $9,000 for transfer station repairs, is one of those ones that we think that we could push off if there is a desire to, again, to dial back some of the capital items. And I don't know if you want to deal with these as you go along, or if you want to take them up at the end. So I'll leave that up to the board.
Was there any potential on the deck, as any public safety concerns, since it's being used by people 3 days a week?
No, it was really, Bob's thought was that we could get another year out of it. He might have to do a little bit of repair work to get that, to make sure that that it doesn't create any safety issues. But it's not a situation where it's collapsing under people or anything like that.
And this is not, in the past, some of the decks that have been replaced were actually done by the VOCTEC.
Right.
This time, it was not going to be able to be done by the VOCTEC, or we knew it wasn't going to happen within a time frame.
Right.
I thought he said it was going to get done by the VOCTEC, and that we were just paying for the...
No, I thought he said originally that it couldn't get done based
Yeah,
on their schedule.
It's a little unclear how soon the tech is going to be able to start taking on some of these community projects. We've been told by Bill Lupini, the superintendent, that he hopes that it will start at the next school year in September. But obviously, there's a backlog now in all of the communities, so it's unclear how many of these projects they're going to be able to get to. This would seem to be an ideal kind of project, not terribly complex, not terribly big, but there could be 50 other similar easy projects for them to tackle.
They certainly wouldn't be able to build it between May and our May town meeting and June, and then they're out of school all summer, so they wouldn't probably start it till next fall anyway.
Correct. That's
So,
correct.
and if this is something we can defer to potentially a fall town meeting, that may be more advantageous. Okay. But I would like to see it stay in, because I think it's...
Stay in the plan, but come off in terms of, defer it,
Defer it, yeah.
keep it on the capital plan?
Right.
Okay. Article 22 is an article that we see pretty much every year, or many years. We've seen that, and that's a supplement to the Chapter 90 money that we receive for road paving. It's not something that I'm terribly excited about putting forth, but in light of what we're looking at, we thought that it was something that we could defer and not have a significant drop-off in the condition of our roads.
So what we don't have yet from the state is what our Chapter 90 is going to look like. So I know in the last cycle, we actually got more than we had originally anticipated, plus our community addition to that allowed us to do more. If we took this 100 out, has Bob or his team put together which projects may have to be deferred, or what can potentially still get done within the existing anticipated Chapter 90?
He hasn't provided a specific list of things that would go undone. It would probably be things like crack sealing and small drainage repairs, things like that. Most of the Chapter 90 is for bigger projects, pave a mile of road, and coal planing, and things like that.
Yeah.
Isn't there usually an article allowing us to accept?
The Chapter 90 actually is correct.
I haven't seen this yet in this warrant.
So we have to add an article, second chapter.
If we would have a fall town meeting at which this 100,000 was asked for, when would the town meeting, that special town meeting, have to be in order to be able to use this money. I mean, if it's late, then he just uses it in the spring. If it's early, he could use it, before the plants shut down.
Right. So usually the plants shut down sometime in December. Depends on the weather. If it is a mild fall, they'll stay open. I've seen them open until Christmas. I've seen other years where it's gotten cold early and they shut down, sometime around Thanksgiving or beginning of December. So.
I think we still have, I'm looking at Nicole, I think we still have some dollars from both our Chapter 90 and/or our local addition left to be expended that Bob was planning on springtime that, okay, that's what I thought. So, that hadn't been expended yet, so
Right.
it would, even if we got to a fall town meeting, even if it was
Like he
October.
just spend it the next spring.
Right. And often with Chapter 90, that lags into the next year, and many communities will sort of stockpile that if they've got a big project that they're anticipating. So it's not like an omnibus appropriation where it has to be spent by June 30th. So is it the preference to defer then to a later date on this as well?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to exclude the FinCom.
They're not shy.
Article 23 is a project that we talked about at the capital budget meeting a few weeks ago, and that is water line extension on River Street. We talked at that meeting, I think it was March 5th, about potentially assessing a betterment to the property owners that the water main would go by. Bob pointed out to me, and I don't know if I was clear on it at the March 5th meeting, that this is not a project that the neighbors or that the residents on the street have been clamoring for. This is something that came up in a study that was done for the DPW, that we've got water quality issues in terms of color, not in terms of the safety of the water, but in terms of manganese and iron in the water that is coloring it. Also flow and volume issues that can be sort of nuisances for a property owner and can be a public safety issue for firefighting purposes. So I would, in terms of the betterment, my understanding is that we haven't done betterments before for water projects. They tend not to be used as widely on water projects as they are on paving projects and on paving projects for instance, an unpaved street that residents ask to get paved. So it's more common in that scenario or in a sewer project. So this is we put the betterment language in there. We can leave it and just define it at town meeting, whether it's to be done, how it's going to be paid for.
So I personally don't have a problem in future water extension and creation projects, especially those that may have been either developer or landowners have been asking for, of having a discussion about a betterment. I know we've never had a discussion about betterment, or at least there hasn't been in the past a betterment for any water issues. For this, my concern on this is that, we're a couple of months out from town meeting. I would argue that most of the residents that would see this water line go by their homes probably don't even know this is being discussed, because this isn't really an issue that, A, they've been clamoring for, and B, it's not being done to positively affect them. It's really being done to affect some water quality issues, as it has to do down in the area where cobblestone is. So, I mean, I think is a worthwhile discussion in the future about betterments. I mean, I know there's some areas in town that we are looking at due to both requests we've had and others to bring water in. But I think a betterment on this would probably be a little unfair to the residents that haven't been clamoring for it, and that really wasn't what we were proposing for it. Now, if there's a interest in a very small percentage betterment, I mean, that's a discussion we should have, but it's kind of my thought.
No, I agree. I had brought this up in the meeting, and I think at this point, it's kind of late in the game to be considering something like this, so I would be more than happy to have that language taken out, and, maybe we can look at it as, in other projects. We have a little bit more time to educate the public and really do a good analysis of whether it would be beneficial or not.
All right, thank you. Article 24 is a capital request by the police chief. You can see on the slide there are two items that we've put in red. They're reflected in shading in your printed copy. $1,300 for rifles and $23,000 for an automatic license, automated license plate reader. The chief feels that he could live with these items, these two items being pushed off a period of time. The others, the radio infrastructure, we'll see in another article or two later. We've got an upgrade on the fire side as well for radios and portables. The office furniture for the police department is a pretty serious need, and some of the station upgrades are pretty pressing. So he'd like to hang on to those, but we think we can safely cut $24,000 and some change for those two items. Article 25 is a request from the fire chief for new hoses. The chief talked about that at the Capitol meeting, that some of the hoses are just beyond their life expectancy. Their NFPA standard repairs to engine 3, replacement of turnout gear, new radios, and training costs for a new employee. So we're not proposing any deferrals in that group. Article
And
20.
just so everybody's clear, the training costs for the new firefighter paramedic are actually for backfill costs. It's actually not a new position per se.
Correct. Yep. Article 26 is funding for a new ambulance in the amount of $255,000. This would, we expect this will come out of the ambulance receipts account and not out of the general fund. Article 27 is a sum of money, $9,500, for a feasibility study for a fire station or public safety facility. We're in the process of assembling a committee, a public building committee that would be looking at police, fire, council on aging, and Memorial Hall, as well as potentially other public buildings that come up. No decision has been definitively made on the issue of separate fire and police or combined public safety. So that would be something that would I think the committee would delve into, and I think at some point before too long, the Board of Selectmen would need to make a definitive ruling on the direction for that as well.
So would these dollars be just for public safety or also for the other goals that we're asking this planning committee to look at, which is council on aging, Memorial Hall, and any other facilities that are non-school related?
So for this feasibility study, we received a proposal from Guinep Associates, which is the architecture firm that we've been working with, and the $9,500 is just for a fire station or a public safety facility. So there'd be
Single facility.
Yes.
So I hate appropriating money for, this is like chicken or egg. We're appropriating money for $9,500 for a combined facility when we haven't, to study for a combined facility if we haven't made a determination if that's the route we want to go. And I know that there's some differing belief of some that it should be combined and some that it shouldn't be. And I just want to, I know we've gotten a bid from one company, but is this going to be 95? Are they going to be looking at both a combined and a separate?
The price that we got was for a fire station.
So this is fire, okay.
Yeah. I think if we went to them and said, yeah, we want to look at a combined, I think we could get a pretty good measure of the way towards that with that $9,500, maybe throwing in some other funds that we could scrape up.
What's a public safety facility then?
So a public safety would be a combined police and fire.
So it does appropriate for both.
But a combined. What I'm saying is.
No, but it says fire
Right,
station
so
or
the
public. So
the
that's
appropriation
one or
could
both.
go for either one.
Right.
But
It does
the-
do what Brian was asking.
But not
the proposal
a fire
that we
station
received-
or a police, or both combined.
Right, the proposal we received was specific to fire, I believe, right?
Well, I think we could work with GNAP on that. I mean, it's
Fire or fire and police.
Or not, or separate fire,
Separate police.
and separate police.
Yeah.
Right, so if the decision was we want to do separate fire and separate police, my expectation is that the 9,500 would not be enough to do that, to do two separate buildings, whether on one site or on separate sites.
What? Why don't we defer this to the possible fall town meeting, and in the meantime, work on clearing up which direction we want to go operationally?
I don't want to lose time and direction with this committee being formed and starting the process. Obviously, it's going to take a while to get to the point of something being done. I mean, if we do a combined facility, we know we need to get likely a new footprint where it's going to go. It won't fit at the fire, wouldn't fit in the existing police. Obviously, fire chief and others have talked about needing to be in a certain radius. I'm just wondering if it is going to be separate, if 95 is not enough. I just think if we're going to study it, let's fully study it. And so we have all the pros and cons. I mean, hey, we may decide to build a combined facility. It might make sense. I don't know.
We could have a further conversation with GNAP in the next few weeks, or immediately, but it would take probably a couple of weeks for them to get us a number, but we could leave this as a sum to be inserted at town meeting, even if we don't have it by the time we go to print. And,
So the committee that we're charging to be created I know we're still waiting for some other folks to express some interest. So folks at home, if you're interested, express your interest. When is the time frame that you would anticipate the dollars on this being expended to start doing the actual formal study by the consultant? Is this something that would be fall? Would it be August? Would it be
well,
October?
it would be after July 1st. That would be
Well,
the
obviously, it would
expectation.
have to be after
Yeah.
July 1st, but I mean,
It would really depend on how quickly certain decisions were made, whether we're going to go separate or combined. If we're going to go separate, are we going to stay on the current fire station site on Lake Street, or are we going to go somewhere else? If we have another piece of land that we can look at. So there's a number of moving parts that would affect the schedule on this.
the other big moving part is, I'd want to hear from the two chiefs and I mean, we haven't gotten to that point before because it's always been a what if, hey, if we ever had this, what do you think? I mean, this would be more of an honest and true discussion.
Yeah, and certainly the board could do that independent of the committee if that was the preference. I think ultimately it's the board's choice how much you delegate that to the committee and how much you want to take that on your own.
If I may, sir, I found a quote. I mean, basically, the focus is on a conceptual building layout. So, and a lot of that is predicated on what site you end up choosing and what what the site can host in terms of can it be fire and police or just one. So, it's broad enough that it should cover a variety of different options we could be looking at.
My experience with these types of studies is that you're better off, and I think we should defer to the fall, but because you're better off looking at everything as a whole rather than piecemeal. Have them come in, because it's been a long time since this committee was, we already had a committee before that looked at this. And so it would be, I think it would be prudent to look at it again, but holistically. So look at everything together and have them give us the decision. That way we can make an informed decision as to whether or not it's going to be one facility, another facility, or a joint facility.
And I don't have a problem if we appropriate dollars in this town meeting to start that holistic review, and then if we need a fall town meeting to appropriate additional, to start delving into, it's going to be a separate fire, it's going to be a separate police, or if we're going to start talking about that the need is other facilities as well in town. I mean, I don't want to shortchange the process, nor do I want to slow down the process.
Right, 'cause there is one critical piece of information that is missing, and it was missing back in 2002. The Public Safety Building Committee was the amount of land needed for a combined facility. And only a design professional can tell us that based upon, the size of the town, the anticipated growth, and what we would need for a footprint for both fire.
And what such sized facility, where is it within that radius that you need to be? I don't want to show our hand to potential sellers of property either, but I want to realize that if that is actually attainable. I mean, that might be the thing that makes the decision between a combined and a separate. Maybe the issue of being combined is the savings we can have on shared space, shared usage. I don't know. That's the only reason why I brought this up. I don't want to belabor it. I know we have a lot ahead of us, but if we're going to spend the 95, I'd rather spend a dollar amount that allow us to look at it all. And if we need to come back in a fall town meeting, which I think we all agree, regardless of what happens at this town meeting and this town election, we're likely to have a fall town meeting. And so I just want to make sure that we're being realistic about the amount. And I get the 95. A lot of that is based on the kind of the quote that you got from a vendor that does this.
Right.
And it's a good thumbnail sketch for that, but
Right.
should we be looking bigger?
I guess my only concern, if I can add a little bit of opinion to this, we've been talking about 2002, Frank, did you say? So we've been talking about, let's just talk about a fire station for the moment. Talking about a new fire station for an awful long time, and these projects in the best circumstances don't move terribly quickly. And so I guess my preference would be to have an appropriation at this annual town meeting coming up so that we can at least start to get some traction on this project, because this is really sort of the linchpin for a number of other projects, because sort of secondary projects like Council on Aging and Memorial Hall really are held up by needing to do something with public safety first. So
Well, I mean,
I can be so bold as to.
So, no,
throw that out
I
there.
don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I look at what actually Masco's getting ready to do, which is to bring in a consultant that's going to look at their whole facility to figure out what their plan is going to be over the next 10 to 15 years. My wife's just done this with a 9 or 11 school facility and had a consultant come in. I actually think we should be looking at all of our facility needs in a single view. I don't disagree that, I mean, we get a fire department where we've got equipment we can't park inside. We get a police department that, God, we got for free and then added 2 double wides to the side. I mean, there's no doubt that we have a need over there either. But we also have a council on aging facility that surely needs to be updated with no parking there. So is it updating there? Is it updating elsewhere? Does a domino effect if the fire department ends up elsewhere? Is that a home for a council on aging? I don't know. Those are the discussions I think we need to make. At the same time, while the first floor of Memorial Hall I think is in good shape, the second floor is an abomination. We can't access it because there's no elevator to there. So, no offense, I know that's where you sit. But I just think, that's...
I noticed.
But I think that's where we should have a full view of it. And I'm not taking from police or fire on this, or specifically this idea. I just actually think we have to look more holistically. And if we're going to spend money on a consultant with a team of residents and department heads that are on this committee, I think we have to look holistically at what are our overall needs, knowing that There's just so much we can afford, and then we have to stagger in a certain way, and maybe a fire department decision and build has to happen, which would allow something to happen on council on aging, or maybe there's a different order thereof. I don't know. That's, I think we all know what it probably is gonna be, but I just think we should.
Do you want to?
I don't want to take this out. I just don't think 9,500 is enough. And I think we're looking at this too narrowly.
Do you want to talk about this further on Tuesday?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor
We've got
the
a little bit
process.
of time before we have to finalize the warrant. Like I said, we can always take the money article, or the money amount out of it, and even we could take out feasibility study for a fire station, and if the board preferred, put in something like a comprehensive facilities plan, if that was the direction that you wanted to go in. But we can try to do a little bit of homework between now and Tuesday.
And I don't know what everybody else thinks, so.
I mean, looking at it comprehensively, so, I always prefer that approach. So what does that entail in terms of money to be able to start, to do that? And, is the money being in place July 1 that important, or is some sort of, discussion on all of the facilities needs to take place before the money is even begins to be spent? And if that's the case, does it even, deferring to the fall, does that not make, really any delay? So, if we're going to talk about this again on Tuesday, give to those two things and see what kind of additional information, we come up with to be able to make decision points on those two issues.
Okay. Okay, Article 28 is a school appropriation, capital appropriation for the digital projector and speaker system, mobile computer cart, and Chromebooks. We've identified the $25,000 in the red up above on the screen as an item that we could put off. School department agrees that they could live without that for a little bit of time if that was preferable.
I mean, that was the
I see.
direction we got from Steve Greenberg, so.
Yeah.
They're willing to pull it, we should.
Okay. 29, again, school department for Howe Manning. 20,500 for iPads and 3,300 for laptops. They've offered to defer the 20,500 for iPads, and we could address that in an upcoming special time meeting.
And since then, we'd be left with 3,300 in Article 20, just combine 20.
Combine it with 28 and make it for both schools.
Okay. 30 is software for it's Middleton's share of the Tri-Town cost for a new software program. They've been running a sort of a homemade software for a long time, and they need to bite the bullet and get a more of an off-the-shelf product. So,
And it might be a reasonable statement to add to here, not just on that, but the decision that was made by the Tri-Town Union that this needed to be unanimous among all three towns in their town meetings. Obviously, we'll be having ours after the other two will be. We'll know. But it's just good for clarification purposes to the voters.
Article 31 is a capital item for Essex Tech. This is one that initially was in the reflected in the operating budget. We decided to just split this out and appropriate it as probably as a free cash item to take it out of the annual assessment. It doesn't really affect the bottom line really too much. 32 is a request from the Board of Assessors for additional funding for consulting services for the triennial certification of property. Article 33 and 34 are both items that we would suggest be considered for deferral to a later date. Article 33 is repairs to the front of the Old Town Hall Council on Aging building, and Article 34 is $75,000 to repave the parking lot at Memorial Hall. Both projects are necessary. I think depending on what we decide to do with Council on Aging, we're going to need to do something to the front of that building, but we think that in light of some of the other items that face us, we could.
So the $75,000 on Memorial Hall parking lot, the area of the lot that's been extended will still be paved with Lisa Binder, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Because that's from a previous appropriation.
That's right.
Okay.
Right. So this would have been to redo the entire lot, including overlay that new section.
Okay.
And then Council on Aging needs a new sign. That sign just, something needs to be done.
Ryan was already, you came up with a great plan for the signs. Is that still in the works?
I think part of it was tied also into this project, and that no question is we're going to be having scaffolding and everything else in front of it. So, but that is noted, Chris. It is a little tired.
Well, the $105,000 plan didn't have a sign
No,
in it.
it didn't. No.
Okay.
No, but I would like to, if this is going to get deferred to the fall, then I think that we need to look at taking this, but also adding a replacing of a sign or signage, however we want to do it.
So the sign, the article that was appropriated several years ago for signs at some of our fields, this is my pet peeve I complain about every time I get a chance. I know, Brian and Andy, you guys are now moving forward on that after 3 years. No offense to you guys.
The signs are on order.
So is there any dollars left there that, within that appropriation, that we could actually give the Council on Aging a sign that doesn't look like it's falling down?
I thought that was part of the appropriation, but can we drag it?
Right. But and I think that we were thinking that with proposed work taking place, that it may be worthwhile to do so after all the rehab work had been completed. But we certainly could look, could consider that.
And is there still some of that appropriation
So
still available for a sign?
the sign money that we've appropriated, there is nothing left in that because it's for the Rupchina Park and for the Traggart Common. So there's a few other alternatives we could look at, as well as the monies that have already been appropriated for Old Town Hall. So we could consider that as well.
Article 35 is an article for technology for townside technology at a number of buildings, servers, and the like, and $28,000 for phone upgrades. Our phone systems are kind of a hybrid, and so we need to have a more
Basically
consolidated
two tin
system.
cans with a string between.
Yeah. Article 36 is, this was a late addition to the warrant. This was $15,000 for master plan consulting services. As much as a former planner, I recognize the need and benefit for master planning and planning in general, but I think in light of everything else, this would be one that we wouldn't suffer greatly by pushing off.
And there's also the possibility that between the community compact and MAPC that we would be able to
Access
start that process. So
Correct. Correct. We may still need it, but it may not have an effect in terms of the schedule. Article 37.
George has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Can we go back to 35?
Yep.
Say $90,000. I only see
Oh, that math doesn't add up, George.
You know, so there's a typo on that.
The version you gave me originally said Dyer Station.
Oh, yes.
It is Dyer.
It is dire, but yeah. Thank you, George.
He put that in. You did that.
It's in mine. I haven't checked it. to
No,
see
it's not here.
It's out, okay.
No longer dire.
Article, so that's essentially the end of the capital items, other than the last, as we get to the end, stabilization and OPEB. So Article 37 is a citizen's petition regarding a bylaw that would restrict or prohibit the mixing, processing of biodiesel. Town council has weighed in a conversation with me that he doesn't think that it's safe to say not in proper form, Tom?
But it's not in proper form. It's unenforceable. It actually only prohibits residents, not strangers.
Did you reach out to the?
I did, yeah, and I haven't heard back from the petitioner, so I don't know if he's.
We had raised that at our previous meeting, that it didn't even talk about what section of our general laws that it should.
Right. If you compare the zoning articles later on in the warrant, that's how it's supposed to be drafted.
Right.
I mean, frankly, this just says it's ordering the town to prohibit something. It's not saying what the law is. The law should say that no one in Middleton, and it's covered in the state code. They did an inspection, and they believed that if there was anything there, it's actually taking place in New Hampshire, which is probably the best place for it anyway.
So are we beholden to put this on the warrant if it's
But you are. If by pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 39, you have to take it. You
Right.
can't even change it.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if even if it was done incorrectly, if we still had to put it on. So we will, but we will take no action
So
on it.
we actually haven't closed the warrant to citizens petitions.
Because we were going to give them an opportunity to see if they wanted to
We need to close soon.
word it. So we thought we would give them a window to say, listen, what you submitted is incorrect. If you'd like to correct it, we'd be more than
Right.
happy.
Well, I don't think it's so incorrect that you can not let it go on the warrant.
Okay.
Because basically, under Chapter 39, you really have to take it. You have to take it as is. If they don't change it, I mean, I could speak at the town meeting. Frank could speak at the town meeting also. I don't think it's something that the town meeting should pass, but it's certainly something that the tenants should really like to ask.
But even if they pass it, it's unenforceable anyway. So the Attorney General's office would.
pass AG.
Right. They would kick it.
But we're directed by Chapter 39
Right.
to put on the warrant.
Put it on the warrant, but are we obligated to have a vote on it?
It's on the warrant.
It's on the warrant, yeah, it's on the warrant. I mean, it's.
Could you just say it's not legal?
Well, if nobody
it's not
moves the-
enforceable, and move it? Yeah,
Can
well,
nobody move the? What if nobody moves the article?
Chapter 39 is the selectmen shall assert the warrant. All subject to insertion of which shall be requested in writing by 10 more registered voters. And you can't change it either. If they don't change it properly, I think you would be asking the town meeting not to pass it. Because it's got.
But you still have to have a vote on it. That's why I just didn't know.
Right, so it's voted.
But that's only if somebody moves the article. If nobody moves the article, then it doesn't get voted on.
Or assume the petitioner will be there to move the article.
You would think. We'll see.
No, I guess what is trying to happen here is the 10 voters are trying to regulate something that is already regulated by the fire department. So it's regulated under the Massachusetts Comprehensive Fire Code and under our local fire prevention code that this is a use that would require a permit. So if there was no permit issued and this was taking place, it would be an illegal activity. And we would take, and we would take appropriate action.
So
Apparently he's been told this, is my understanding.
But wouldn't that preclude this from being placed onto our warrant, regardless of what? I'm a big believer in citizens petition and ballot questions. However, I mean, if we got an outrageous ballot question that superseded or was in conflict with existing law, why would it be placed?
Well, I don't think it necessarily conflicts with it. I just think it's.
Well, if this as written passed and the Attorney General's office eyes were closed at the time and said, great, it's been approved, what law does the fire chief and the men and women of his department do? Do they follow that? Do they follow the existing law, or are they in conflict?
Well, they would follow the existing law. This has no fines or penalties associated with it. I don't know how you're going to get into the house to inspect to begin with. And, and then you have the added situation of proving that somebody's a resident, whoever is running this process to begin with. If Frank, anybody in the department ever wanted to enforce it, they could go by the state code. So it's unnecessary. But, I mean, 10 registered voters do have the right to request that be on the warrant.
Did anyone explain that to the 10 registered voters?
My understanding is that this is a typical neighbor dispute concerning the septic system, among other things. Frank is getting this, Rick gets these all the time. This is the way things work, and the 10 registered voters are aware of this. I think 5 of them are all in the same household, aren't they, Frank? 5 of the 10 people that are the registered voters.
I'm not sure.
So that's my understanding,
Yeah.
that they read the whole thing, but they're
Yeah.
pushing for it.
So they have been informed, and like I said,
This is a combination of months and months. This goes back to before the new year, so this goes on. This has been going on for quite a while.
Probably will be long after something is done with this. So the reality is we need to close our warrant to citizens petitions, and we probably need to do it by Tuesday night's meeting at the latest.
we could do it tonight if you
Do it right now.
I mean, we could, but if we close it, this is what goes to town meeting.
That's fine.
I make a motion that we close all, the town meeting to all citizens petitions.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Citizens petitions are closed. Yes. Just to see if they wanted to change it to, no.
So I'd highly recommend that our moderator and our town council be prepared for what will be
Some fun.
at least 5 questions that will be posed on this.
There have been instances that moderators at the moderators' annual meetings have brought up where there were citizens petitions like this that you had to put on the ballot and that the moderator just said it's unenforceable, or it's really you're just getting a consensus but that it's not legal. So Tom and I can kind of figure out how to present that.
Next several are street acceptances. 38 is acceptance of Woodbury Lane. 39 is the acceptance of Lavoy. 40 is the acceptance of Flying Fox. On Article 39, Lavoy Lane, that was approved last year for acceptance. There's a requirement under the general laws that the petitioner has to record a plan within I think it's 120 days of the close of town meeting. That and don't hold me to that 120 days, but whatever the time limit is, the petitioner did not meet that.
I think it's 6
and
months.
So it has to happen all over again. Is it 6 months?
I think it's 6 months, yeah.
So that's why that's on again. So Article 41 is to modify an access easement on 9 Ross Lane. There's an extensive easement on 9 Ross and on the abutting subdivision parcel. The owner of 9 Ross has initially requested that the easement be eliminated. Bob Labossiere has requested that we retain at least a 10-foot wide easement. So that's what's shown on the slide. Article 42 is a request of Kathy Thurston at 19 Liberty Street to have an easement granted to her. It's the red outlined box, 273 square feet. There's an encroachment of steps and a retaining wall that extends partially into the right-of-way, clouding her title, and so she has requested that this be conveyed. Initially, she was requesting a fee interest in that 273 square feet. Council has advised that that is perhaps not in not the best approach, and so we have spoken to Kathy Thurston's counsel, who agrees that an easement would be okay, and Madam Moderator, I don't know if you want to, if you have any thoughts on this one, or you're okay with it? Or
I'm
you
okay
wanna-
with it. I think it's a dangerous precedence for town meeting.
So,
Yeah, this is not the only one out there like this.
well,
So,
I think this might not be the only one in that neighborhood that's like this.
Yeah.
So, and the purpose, it's a little unclear. It sounds like we're transferring.
No, it's just,
I know we're transferring,
Convey an easement.
yeah, but it's conveyance, but it sounds like we're transferring.
So there would be a document that would be recorded.
My understanding is that the town is retaining fee simple, but we're granting her an easement, or just a right of way to maintain the steps on that.
Is there any other vehicle with which this problem could be corrected short of town meeting? Because there are so many similar situations in this town, and you don't want town meeting to become a way of gutting violations or supporting violations of prior zoning.
Ryan, can you show, the line's a little faint, but show where the existing edge of pavement is right there. I think you guys all know this house on Liberty Street, and it is amazing that where the actual road, the pavement ends, and where the layout extends into, so it appears right now that that's her driveway, that's all of her, and it's not. So this really just only rectifies that, and in my opinion, it's a Band-Aid, so that the sale of the property can go forward. I mean, if the town ever needed to extinguish that easement so that they could expand that roadway or do anything in that roadway, that homeowner, the new homeowner now, is going to be in the same situation as. So it's a quick fix, but it's not.
Except ZBA sees that, from a ZBA perspective, ZBA sees that all the time where people are coming in to have the ZBA fix things that they did, without the proper authorities, and then they can't sell or transfer. And so they come to the ZBA. ZBA says, no, we can't do that. To have the town meeting become the, almost a place where you would appeal or override a decision of the ZBA or a decision of the building inspector is just something, that I think has to be looked at really cautiously.
I think typically the layout is always more than the pavement anyways.
Sure.
It's a good amount. Like Chris said, the first red line is actually where the roadway is, and then the rest of our layout is the other little sliver-like. That's the problem is, well, the road was never put in the place it was supposed to be put.
The road was probably laid out after it was built. It's a 45-foot layout, so there's a pretty wide layout. The pavement is probably 22 feet, something like that. So fairly narrow considering the width of the pavement. But
And the road is much more towards the bottom part of that.
correct.
That other
It's- yeah.
screenshot.
Yeah, it's kicked quite far to one side, but it does raise an issue of the town's role in correcting private property owners' self-imposed problems.
Because there's still a portion of the retaining wall that will not even be encompassed in this easement, that'll still be sticking out into the roadway. So that it really doesn't correct everything. Like I said, it's a quick fix so that.
It allows the stairs not to be removed.
I thought she was going to cut that wall, though. Isn't she going to take part of that wall out?
Well, that's
in
not-
order to do
I
this?
think that might be the plan, get rid of that last piece of it. I think it's like a Versalock wall, so
Yeah.
it's easy enough to remove.
I raised the same concern point.
But I'm neutral on this. I mean, I'm neutral on all of these matters, but I'm neutral on that. It's just, it's the broader concern about what we're choosing to put on the warrant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next several articles are zoning items. Article 43 is a change to the wording regarding the zoning map, and also repealing the development schedule, which ran its course. It had a sunset provision that has already run its course, so it is preference of the ZBA to simply strike it from the bylaw entirely. Article 44 on page 16 is change to the dimensional requirements, or the notes to the dimensional requirements having to do with lot width, and a desire to, or an effort to clarify or simplify the language having to do with lot width. And I know, Madam Chair, that you've been dealing with this in the other hat that you wear, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or let us keep it resolved.
Yeah, and basically it's, I was at the Master Plan Committee the other day, and they were saying that, they were confused by the language and what did it mean, and basically it does not change how anything about the dwelling, how we measure lot width and frontage and the parallel line, et cetera. All it does is kind of clarify the language to bring it more into conformance with the way that the law has been interpreted. So it doesn't change really anything about the way we're going to interpret the bylaw. This just brings the language more in compliance with what we're actually doing. Is that the best way? Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Doesn't change existing rules with, distance through boundary through dwelling, setbacks, traditional private sewer or whatever. This doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with conformity to the law.
Can I ask a question? Who will be, I'm assuming someone's going to have to present this or be prepared to answer questions, because I think there are going to be a lot of them. Is there someone who's been designated on your board, or who's going to present this?
Well, usually the planning board moves these. So if, Katrina said that she would have in the PowerPoint presentation available, but I guess the best way is for us to just clarify that it's not changing the way that things are going to be done going forward. It's just bringing the language into conformance with the way it's always been interpreted. It's just kind of clarifying the language a little bit.
Article 45
Do we need a PowerPoint for that?
There are some people who are going to need a PowerPoint.
I know. Zoning is, sorry.
Article 45 is changes to the principal uses and definitions. Those are detailed in the table, and then in the text that follows at the bottom of page 19 and continuing on to page 22, through page 22.
When is the drop dead date for printing, that you need to send this to the printer?
It's about 2 weeks.
Like the 15th or something, or?
Second week of April is usually when they need it by.
Is it still going to the jail?
Yes, it is.
So I'm just trying to figure, the planning board has their public hearing on these. So if there's going to be any changes to it,
When's the hearing date?
the 13th,
13th of
April.
Type it quickly.
But we can have pretty much everything squared away and work with them on that. So that's
Because if things don't, what I'm saying is if certain warrant articles don't make it to the final cut, or if there's some changes that need to be done
Sure.
to something. Okay.
I think typically we try to aim to get it there on the 15th. Chris,
Okay.
So I wouldn't foresee that as an issue.
Yeah, usually they need 2 weeks or whatever. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is there usually a place in the warrant where for the planning board recommendation, if printed, if available?
No, usually,
Or you
they usually make up a
make it
separate sheet saying who's moving what article, and the
We did it-
Finance Committee always moves them, and then they defer to,
So for the street acceptances, we had them. We had planning board recommendation. I didn't know if you want the same for zoning. So if that's not the case, then that's okay.
yeah, usually we do a sheet that says every article that we're going to be giving a recommendation on, and then,
You'll have the master plan committee recommendations in a couple of days.
Okay.
Be able to insert them.
That's the 13th of September.
yes.
Chris, is it possible for the planning board to address the issue of your recommendations on the road approvals prior to the night of the meeting? Because that caused some havoc last year. It seems like it could be avoided if the construction people knew in advance that there was a deadline for them completing what they need to do to
Right.
get the approval. I mean,
And
just-
those three really should have gone, the Voy was approved last year, and it's just because they didn't file the plan.
But my question is, then why can't we get a recommendation in advance so that everyone's on the same page going into the meeting?
Right, and Woodbury and Flying Fox, they tried it, but there was some things that they needed still to do. They're completely finished now. So,
Lynn, it may not be reflected in the version that you have.
Yep.
But we have the planning board recommendation for 38, 39, 40.
Oh, I apologize, Chris, I had the old one that didn't have the recommendation.
Oh, that's okay,
and
'cause
I
we
had
are-
asked that we, if
That
possible,
was
get
something
them
that
in
just,
advance.
I think, went in since you and
Okay.
I met the other day.
and we did already kind of talk on some of these, but when we do our public hearing, we go through everyone and we vote as to what our position is going to be on them.
Day of or on the 13th?
No, on the 13th.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. We left some of those last year just because of the terrible winter that we had and trying to give the developers a little bit more time. But because these have been done now almost a year, that, everything's fine.
Okay, great.
Okay, Article 46 at the bottom of page 22 is a change to the special dimensional regulations having to do with the light industrial district and the business district.
Lynn, actually, if we just take a minute. So, Lynn, back in 2008, when Mark Borowski assisted us in rewriting the zoning bylaws, supposedly this light industrial district, these words were excluded from the restatement of this particular bylaw, and it was always intended that it would be business and light industrial, but for some reason,
I have to look at my old notes on it.
Okay.
My memory is that it may have been excluded for a reason. If it is, I'll let you know, but my memory is that that was a discussion that we had and that there was a discussion about whether or not it should be included or not, but I don't want to say without going back and looking at it, but I'll do that.
and I know Katrina was going to look into some of it too.
Yeah, I can look into that.
So that was our concern about making sure if that was a Scrivener's error to.
Yeah, I did. My gut reaction is that it was not
Okay.
a Scrivener's error, but
So when you look at that, could you?
yes,
let me-
definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll try to
very
do
much.
that tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Article 47 on page 23 is a change to the dimensional requirements for single and two-family residential structures. This would add a shape factor formula to the dimensional regulations, and there is a chart, a diagram on page 25 to try to illuminate what is intended by this article.
So you think you had a lot of discussions and questions on the previous articles, wait for this one.
This makes it a two-night meeting.
Yeah, no, this one probably will.
Okay, Article 48 is an item we see every year. This is the contribution of the Light Department to offset the certain costs associated with their operation.
So we know what that number is? Are we going to place
Yes,
that in there,
it's,
pre-printing?
It's $20,000 less than we've seen the last few years. It's $220,000 this year. Last year, they were at $240,000. The difference happens to coincide with the anticipated savings of electricity that we're seeing from the streetlight conversion.
Lo and behold.
Article 49 is the MELD operating budget.
Do we have the budget?
So, can I ask, are we required by bylaw to get a copy of that budget?
I've always, everywhere I've worked, I've seen a budget for enterprise as well as general fund. So I'm told this is what you usually get.
So it was my understanding that language stated that we were supposed to get a copy of the budget. It's been a question I've asked previous years, but, so I'm asking you, the new guy.
We can check with DOR on that and see what they're required to do in terms of that. Article 50 is transfer from free cash to offset the tax rate. Essentially, it's treating a piece of free cash as a revenue source for the purpose of the operating budget. looking at $350,000, which is roughly done $300,000 to $350,000. We did a little bit more last year. I think we did $650,000 or somewhere in that area. And then, as we talked earlier, we'll be doing another several $100,000 for the regional school assessment. So this gets us back to where we typically are in terms of free cash for a revenue source. Article 51 is a transfer of $100,000 to the stabilization fund, which is our rainy day account. 52 is a transfer of $100,000 to the OPEB trust. And 53 and 54 are two new articles that came out of the conversation on Friday. The working group that we had, 53 would establish a special ed stabilization fund and also allow an appropriation into that fund. And that would be used for, we would treat it in a sense the way that that we did 50, 51, and 52. We would probably take a piece out of free cash, put it into this new stabilization fund. In years when we know that we're going to be hit with a special ed spike at the local school level, we would draw out of that stabilization fund as an offset to the operating budget. In years where we didn't expect an increase or a spike, we would just leave it. And if we had a year where we thought we were actually a decrease, we could actually appropriate into it to replenish it. 54 is a request for authorization to seek special legislation from the legislature for a special ed reserve fund. As you know, we have, the Finance Committee has a reserve fund that is used for unforeseen and extraordinary unanticipated expenses excuse me, that come up during the year. This would be essentially another reserve fund that could be available for spikes in year to special education. So if we had a family move into town unexpected, we had no reason to, or no way of knowing that they were coming in, no way to plan for it, resulted in a mid-year spike to the special ed budget, they could seek supplemental appropriation or transfer from the reserve fund. This is something that's going to take some time. The legislature closes its session whenever they finish the budget, probably the first week in July.
Well, actually, they close their session at the end of the calendar year. Formal session closes July 15th or 17th. However, non-controversial matters can be taken all the way up until December 31st, and usually a home rule petition is deemed to be non-controversial, although one individual can stop it.
Right.
So the difference is, and you and I talked about this today, so in talking with Senator Tarr's office today, the Senate Counsel's office views this a little bit differently than the House Counsel's office does. Senate Counsel wants to see the language that would be the actual home rule petition be the language that's voted on by town meeting rather than as devised here. So I know Steve Greenberg at Tri-Town Union has come up with some language. I know you have as well. Both, I think it's Natick? Hingham, and then I know Masbo has had some language that they've been proposing over the years. Masbo's language is a little bit different. It states that the school committee can withdraw from the fund. What we're saying is Selectmen Finance Committee, I believe, with a school committee request. Harak Shah, the general counsel to Senator Tarr's office, is willing to take what it is we're proposing and make sure it passes Senate Council muster before it gets voted on by town meeting. So we've got a, again, 2-week period up until the 15th when this gets printed to make sure that the language is such. And I think that we should at some point have a discussion with Topsfield and Boxford as it relates to Masco. I think this would be a great opportunity to look at that, to kind of smoothing those curves on sped costs in the future. I mean, because as this would likely be just for Tri-Town right now, but in the future could be a tool that could be used for all the schools.
Brian, they want the actual the language of the home rule petition.
So the Senate Council's been kind of, in a case like this, rather than, and historically in the past, what it's been is, town meeting directs the selectmen to ask for a home rule petition. The Senate Council's on this has stated that they want to see language that states what that would be. Now, technical changes can happen within the local affairs committee, but given that they're not going to be in formal session after July 15th, we should probably, for obvious reasons, make sure that the language passes muster by the Senate clerk and council and probably the House council.
Two alternates to the planning board. We had to have the language in there. So
And
it has to be voted on.
the sample that we have is pretty straightforward. It's really two or three sentences. So it's not, it's not terribly verbose or long, so.
Basically, this just allows us not to have to call a special town meeting to actually expend. I mean, and if we're taking $50,000 out to expend, but we're going to spend $15,000 on a special town meeting, it kind of defeats the purposes of having it.
So we're asking for a stabilization fund in one article, and then we're asking for a reserve fund in the other. So the stabilization fund, we can appropriate money into, and then town meeting has to appropriate it out?
Correct.
Okay, but the reserve fund would just be something we could do in-house without the town meeting.
And the stabilization fund is kind of like a stopgap measure until the legislature approves this. Because who knows, it may not get approved this calendar year in the legislature. It could, because MASBO hasn't been successful in the last couple of years with their language, although their language is a little bit different. It states that the school committee would approve, among other things, so.
And if we knew that there was a spike coming in the ensuing year, we would want to take it out of stabilization rather than out of the reserve.
True.
Right.
If you know that you're going to have high costs for the next fiscal year, school year, you want to take it out of stabilization. But this would result, if a family moved into town with a special needs student, we would have to call a special town meeting to pay for that. We would want to call that out to the public, like, comfortable for the family. That's sort of the difference between the two.
We're dealing with this currently. Family recently moved in that doesn't, English language is not there first, and this is a big situation for the school committee, so appreciate your efforts in this.
Well, it allows us to smooth. I mean, John's done a really good job looking at what that would have been over a several-year period, and some of the spikes that we've dealt with, which get built into the operating budget, although I know Tri-Town truly does a zero-based as it relates to the special ed account. It's a very conservative number that they come up with. But it would go a long way towards smoothing those spikes and filling those valleys with a pretty level number that we don't have to have a difficult debate at town meeting floor.
And finally, the last article is Article 55, which I don't know if the board has seen before. This is something that's been in the works for a while.
Are we getting our land from DCAM?
That's what we would like you to believe that.
In a recent conversation with DCAM Council, they asked us to have town meeting
Give the board official permission to acquire the 16 properties. So this is more formality than anything else.
The article that we had 3-4 years ago.
That was the request. The legislation. The legislation was passed, and now this
But it was passed with an error in it.
Right, but then that was subsequently corrected. This is actually a requirement for the deed.
Okay.
For the deed to be consistent. So it's just something that came up recently, and we wanted to address it now, so it wouldn't be a hindrance for us to officially accept these 16 parcels.
It'd be nice to get this resolved.
Is there going to be a map or something?
Yeah, this
I think we
is,
have a map from the previous meeting. When
so
we did this.
this is what happened was these parcels were given to the Essex County when it was a county, and when the county was dissolved, the parcels went to DCAM, Department of Capital Asset Management. Well, their primary goal is to build things and
build or rent.
Yeah, and we didn't want them really having control over what we considered our open space. So we've been petitioning them for years to give us back our land and let us have stewardship over this, so we would have more control over it. And we just, quite honestly, just don't trust them that they're not going to try to build on it.
The vast majority of it's not buildable anyway. Some of it's wet, some of it's.
Adjacent to the river.
But this just allows the
Allows us to take
Conservation
it.
Commission to have.
And have control over it.
Yeah, I
An
just,
ownership.
when it's saying, by purchase and stuff like that, I'm just going to question when people see purchase and ask, what is it, and, where are all these parcels? Because some of them, 20 acres and stuff like that, where is that? And probably none of it is buildable, but I just would envision a lot of questions.
There's going to be a lot of them in this town meeting.
I have a question on one of Sorry,
She's asking us to. Go. No, go ahead.
On 14, it talks about the bills being due within 30 days of the date of mailing.
Yeah.
How does someone know what the date of mailing was? And that's
that's actually a really good
about that
question.
language.
So,
Send out to you, it's for the date of mailing. How do you know at that point when it's mailing?
I mean, currently, we have a due date on it, and it says within 30 days. I mean, it'll say the date of the bill, like, is January 27th, and it's due February 28th or something. I mean, it's very clear, and I think if it's not clear, we're going to get into enforcement issues, but that was just my thought.
so do our bills actually have a due date on them?
Some of it, I know that like excise does. I looked at this today and I didn't have my real estate bill there, but I know the personal property bills have the date that it's.
I don't think you're talking about real estate and excise tax bills.
We're not. We're talking about municipal.
Police sending a bill for a detail, being able to charge interest if it's late. All of the tax.
Sewer, yeah. I mean sewer, utilities.
Issue date and tax.
So if the police department did a detail for the gas company,
They have due date on it now.
so they have a due date, but if that bill is not paid within 30 days, we would be able to charge the gas company interest? What would the chance be of actually getting it?
I think it's better than what we're doing now. Again, this is just authorizing the board to make that decision to allow us. We would then come to you after town meeting, say, can we charge it beyond police details? And how much do you guys want to, within the limits of the law, to charge for each?
Right.
So it's more just, this one's just establishing, allowing the board to take what bills we can charge and so on and how much.
Right, 'cause, I mean, we
Not property tax, personal property
No,
tax.
is there other items? Like this,
Yeah, we should probably clarify that in the purpose that it's not.
well, we are trying to make this.
No, I know, but it's just,
And the same rule applies to property tax. and
but the
excise
rule
as
is
well.
not a decision that's, maybe I'm wrong, but the interest that's, if somebody doesn't pay their property tax, and whatever interest it is added to that over a period of time, that's not a number determined by the Board of Selectmen, that's a number determined by Mass General Law.
Correct.
So if this is making a determination by the board, am I correct? Board of Selectmen, we just should clarify that. That would.
20% interest. 25? 30%?
Have to be Wall Street to get that.
But, here's the problem, is that the police do details for these companies. We have to, process payroll every 2 weeks.
Yeah, they're paid long before we're paid.
We're actually supplementing, we're paying out, and we haven't received, we don't have the receivables in, so, yeah, so we need to make sure that we have a mechanism to keep that.
No, I don't
cash flow.
disagree with it.
Okay. Are there, if there's no more questions on the warrant, we can get to the kind of the meat of the rest of the meat of the business, which is the,
Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of the warrant articles? All right.
the whole issue surrounding the override for supplemental appropriation for the operating budget. As we met last Friday, the working group, the number is the number that was talked about at that time was $690,000. So if you look at the top in the red band, we were at, oh, thanks. We were at 567 at our last Saturday meeting, March 5th. We grabbed an extra $100,000 or we're able to estimate an extra $100,000 in revenue as a result of the changes in fees. That was approved by the board last week. The $20,000 difference in the MELD pilot payment that we noted a few minutes ago works against us. $40,000 we project in new growth that we can take advantage of based on some real estate development that is underway that we'll be able to count on. The motor vehicle commitment, the first commitment came in at a little higher than we expected, so we increased our assumption by 60,000, and then.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why is that a trend that's been happening over the last couple of years in our motor vehicle commitments, or is this a bump that seems strange? And I understand that maybe our revenue forecast has been a little conservative, but is this $60,000?
It's always up. As cars get more expensive, the economy improves.
People are leasing more. No, I get that, but
Yeah.
you might buy a car and keep it 10 years. You lease, after 3 years, you got to get a new one.
The first commitment has gone up steadily over the last couple of years.
Okay.
Have you seen some of the cars in town?
Oh, shot across the bow.
So we felt confident in being able to up that by $60,000, and then some miscellaneous other adjustments for another $48,000. So that brings us to a shortfall of $339,000. We talked a little bit earlier about.
Is the Tri-Town budget, are you guys done?
Masco?
No, Tri-Town. I know Masco is. You guys have
The
voted.
elementary.
Elementary. Are you guys done? Have you? Well, I mean, I know when we
Has it
talked
been-
on Friday, there was a couple of more.
Yeah, has it been voted?
Fine-tuning.
Okay.
Yeah, it's close. It hasn't been voted.
I mean, I don't think that the change will be dramatic from where you are now. No, I get it.
So as we talked about earlier, we're seeing increases in our Masco assessment, and particularly in our Essex Tech enrollments. And do you have that?
You have, here, that's, just
Oh,
keep
okay.
going for you. So,
All right. So this shows where we are in state aid over the years. In 2010, education was a little under 1.6 million. We're now just under 1.6 million. And when you adjust for inflation, that's where we should be. So a shortfall there just on the education side of almost $139,000. Similarly, in the general government, we were at $589,000 in 2010. We're only up now 29,000.
But it's important to know that 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 were all 588. The governor, for the first time, boosted general government aid. One of the first time that's probably been raised in 15 years.
Right. And so similar trend with Masco actually has gone down in real dollars and has gone down, closing in on $500,000 when you adjust for inflation. So Masco is, we've talked about this a number of times, that even though our enrollment didn't go up in this year, and overall the enrollments are going down, our percentage has gone up in this year as a result of the shifting enrollments within the district. So in 2012, we were at 33 and 3/4% of the assessment or the enrollments, and now we're at almost 36%. Essex is a little bit more a little bit more bad. Well, bad budget news. Good from an educational standpoint, in that more of our students are taking advantage of Essex Tech. It's a pretty stark contrast when you look at grades 11 and 12. We have a total of 5 students from Middleton at Essex Tech, and in grades 9 and 10, we have a total of 31. So we expect, obviously these two are going to just shift up in the next 2 years, probably unchanged or substantially unchanged. And the 7th and 8th grade, the students that are now in 7th and 8th that are going to be moving into 9th and 10th in the next couple of years, probably going to be similar numbers to this.
Yeah, because 9th and 10th are in the new facility. The 11th and 12th started in the old facility.
They started in the old. So our assessment for the coming year, $625,000, roughly $17,000 per student, and increasing over time. Here's where we kind of think it's going to be over the next few years, roughly 15 students per class. So when you look out to 18, that's another $243,000. The year after, another $191. And again, this is all compounding. So
without the budget that changing $1.
Correct.
And this year's budget of Essex Tech was a very small increase percentage-wide across the entire district.
Correct.
For, I think, some obvious reasons to some issues that we're having there, but that's not going to continue.
Right. So this sort of gets back to the comments that Ira made a year ago, talking about being able to build additional capacity, and part of what we talked about on Friday, and we talked about it at the Saturday meeting, that we don't need just to close the shortfall for 17. We need to close the shortfall for 17 and be planning beyond that. And so that's why that's why we need to be really cognizant of the long-term effects. Here, this again shows what we expect the impact of Essex to be over the next couple of years. Another $400,000 in 2 years.
Question?
Sure.
Do we know what the cost per student is in Masco?
It's like
14?
It depends on what year. That was for FY14. FY15, it's 15.3. For FY16, it'll be higher. For FY17, it'll be even higher still.
We are no longer under the state. We're not below the state average.
This past year was the first year that we were no longer under. For all preceding years, we've always been under the state average. And one of the reasons when we talked about the budget last year was that we made some hiring decisions to try to pull in people so that we could decrease the out-of-district placement costs. So that was one of the reasons for that as well. But I just want to point out, this is the first year that we have been over.
I was just looking at, the difference between sending a kid to the Tech versus Masco. If it's not
Vocational's always higher.
Right, but if it's not that big of a difference, wouldn't we expect the increase there to be offset by a decrease at Masco?
No, unfortunately, it's not a one-for-one.
Yeah, okay.
And that often comes up. And Teresa, I don't know if you want to chime in on this, but when and it really goes through all levels of education. If you lose, a certain percentage of your student enrollment, it doesn't directly correlate to the number of teachers. You lose 4 kids in every grade, you're probably not going to get rid of any teachers because of that.
Yeah, because it's dispersed throughout, 6 grades. So it's kind of like what Andy said. It's not like if you lost 25 kids, it impacted a 6th grade or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking it more from our allocation, right? So, if kids go to the tech, theoretically that decreases our allocation from Masco.
It actually works the opposite, because we send a greater number of students to Essex Tech than Topsfield and Boxford. So therefore, when we sent our 11 more kids this year, and the other 2 towns sent an additional 2, then that spiked our percentage of the Masco budget.
So again, this is the slide I showed a few minutes ago, kind of how we get to where we are now at 339. So without the benefit of an override, this is what we would. This is the kind of scenario that we've come up with. We would hold the elementary schools to a 5% increase. They're 155,000 above a 5% increase at the moment. So we would force them down. That's almost half of the shortfall. Again,
and that has to be clear that will be personnel cuts. That will be personnel cuts at the Tri-Town Union, FTE cuts.
Again, Masco and Essex, this assumes that that those budgets will be approved by the other communities. We have no reason to doubt that will happen. So we cannot go back to them and cut them unilaterally. Other types of cuts that we would be looking at, we've got an unfilled patrolman position. That would save us about $73,000. We expect to have a vacancy when Chief Twist retires later this summer.
We'll still have a chief.
We would still have a chief, but we would probably be unable to backfill that vacancy at a savings of about $61,000. Some cutbacks in summer employees at DPW and road materials for another $33,500. And then we talked about the summer recreation program, eliminating that or changing that, eliminating the general fund contribution to that would save about $20,000. So that would get us essentially to our shortfall amount within $3,600. So.
And remember, that does nothing. Those cuts will do nothing for future years that we just talked about increases at.
Correct. So that gets us balanced for fiscal 17. It gives us. It doesn't help us at all towards 18 and 19. And again, with Masco and Essex, Essex going up $200,000 or so just by itself in 17, and another 200 in 18. So these are just one scenario that we put together without affecting current staffing. Current regular staffing.
No, I think we are. I mean, we will affect current staffing at Tri-Town. That will absolutely happen.
At Tri-Town, yes, that's correct.
At the Middleton Elementary.
It may have an effect on your ambulance revenue on the other end.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, Brian, you keep calling it Tri-Town.
I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep saying Tri-Town. I apologize.
So other things that we're looking at, we talked about the meals tax earlier. Again, that is $200,000 when it's fully implemented, but we're really only able to assume $166 in the first year. And again, that's subject to the whims of town meeting. Other things down the road that we would look at, changes to the trash program, the transfer station program. Many towns are going towards, and the state is recommending a move towards pay-as-you-throw, where there's a per-bag fee. You have to buy your bags and if it's not in a bag, you can't drop it there. Other fees for white goods, dryers, washing machines, televisions, computer monitors, rugs, couches, things like that, mattresses.
Last year, we spent probably $12,000 just on getting rid of televisions and computer screens.
Right. So those are the kinds of impacts that we're looking at. Susan?
I'm wearing my taxpayer hat and not my senior center director hat here. But if you realize that 20% of the population in Middleton is senior, most of them are not creating much trash. So is that not going to reduce the fees and not increase it? I don't think that you're going to have families with 3 kids, necessarily spending a lot more on trash, but you will be having seniors, oh, this is great, I'm not paying $100.
Well, you're still going to get your dump sticker, right?
Correct.
You're still going to buy your dump sticker.
You want to get people to town meeting? Put something about trash on it.
No,
But
it's $100 for that. If you're saying instead you pay whatever.
It would be in addition. It would be in addition.
So,
you might end up reducing the sticker fee nominally, but then there would be a bag fee on top of that and these other charges. So, but you bring up a good point of, and it sort of plays on what Chief Twist said, was that you have to be careful and you have to analyze how cuts are made, because you can make reductions that end up costing you revenue. The obvious one is if we were in a bigger community, we had, for instance, 3 clerks collecting at the tax collector's window. We decided that we were going to close town hall a day a week, or we were going to reduce the number of collection clerks. That might not be the brightest idea in the world, because it makes it harder for people to pay their taxes and other charges. So we do have to be careful, and we have to be critical in how we analyze those things. So, I'm sorry, Brian, did I cut you off?
No. I was just going to say on the trash issue is, as we look for other adjustments, should the override not pass, and the effects that would happen not just in FY17 but 18 and 19, there's a lot of things done at the transfer station that are now costing the town a lot of money to dispose of, when previously they didn't. And those are the issues that we'd have to look at.
But would you keep the per bag fee less than what some businesses in town are charging, who come to your house, pick it up?
To be honest with you, haven't. This is just an adjustment that we would look at and explore. I mean, we haven't got anywhere near a case of even saying that this is what we would do. These are things that we've looked at that could potentially be reviewed if we needed to have it. Is it that, or is it making more cuts in other departments?
And realistically, on March 24th, we couldn't put into effect a pay-as-you-throw system for July 1. But these are, it's these more aggressive types of changes that we would be forced to look at if we didn't have the benefit of, if we didn't have the additional revenue that an override provides. So I'm not proposing it. I'm just throwing it out there as as an example of the kind of things that we'll be looking at.
Just an FYI, when I've done this in other communities, I've gotten grant money and gotten some outside consulting, particularly out of the DEP.
Yeah.
So you might consider that in the future.
And we certainly would. This is not something that we would need to reinvent. This has been done in probably 100 communities in Massachusetts alone. So there's plenty of models out there to choose from. But again, this is to illustrate the kind of situation that we're facing in town, where we've kind of picked the low-hanging fruit, and the easy changes or the easy revenue sources have been exhausted. So that's kind of where we where we are in terms of the situation that we face with a fiscal year 17 shortfall of $340,000, and the need to not only make that up but plan for the future. So So it really gets down now to the hard decision-making of what that number should be for the ballot question this coming May.
The 690,000 number that we had talked about on Friday, allows about $350,000 in additional capacity to be used toward coming increases at Essex Tech.
Sorry, FY18,
And, it also almost exactly matches the total of the 3 failed overrides from last May.
I think the difference is we've got a little new growth potential update and local revenue projection update that may take that number and may be able to make it somewhat lower.
Yeah. If we make it a little lower, does that increase the probability of the override passing? So is a $625,000 override more likely to pass than a $690,000 override? And is it and even if it makes it that, and we determine that, then we are just putting ourselves that much more likely to have a need for an override in 18 or 19. So, I think,
Well, I will tell you, if we propose an override that passes this year,
we can't come back.
We come back a year or two later, people will show up with burning pitchforks, and rightly so.
From what I've looked at, 690 does give you a solution to your structural deficit for the next couple of years at least. And any chance of going back for next year for another one is ludicrous.
Or even the year after.
Or the year after.
We haven't done an operational override in this town since, was it the mid-90s? I think we talked about this before. I think it was, I don't know, George must remember this.
It's been a while.
But it's going to be the same story if we pass a $340,000 override.
But if we did a $340,000 override, we don't have any capacity for...
Right, so we're going to be back next year, and is it going to be the
Yeah.
same pitchforks you talked about at 6?
Yeah, I mean, my argument isn't
Yeah.
to fill just the gap and that's it. I mean, I think it needs to be larger than that.
Somewhere in the middle, maybe.
And as I've said, I think there's different needs that have been deferred operationally in some of our departments over the years. I've said this 1,000 times on Public Works. I think we have a FTE need there because our town is much bigger than it is, a lot more roads. There's a lot of deferred maintenance that hasn't been able to be done, not capital maintenance, but regular operational maintenance that hasn't been able to be done that we haven't addressed in the last 2 to 3 budgets because of other needs that we've had to fill. We've seen the education portion of our budget grow while our municipal side hasn't been able to grow to keep pace with some of our needs. We've done the best we could with police and fire. Public Works, maybe not so much. And some of those we're going to have to pay for that at some point in the future. Not this year, obviously, and probably maybe not even next year, regardless of what happens with the override. So there needs to be some capacity. Because there's nothing wrong with saying we have a structural deficit in our budget. It's there now. And it's going to continue if we don't fill it correctly.
I agree with the 690.
Yep, I do too.
What do you folks in the Finance Committee think?
You know me, I said 690.
It sounds about, it's the right thing to do. Just because we have the capacity, we don't have to spend it next year, so it's not like we're going to go nuts. I mean, it's got to last a few years.
I think historically, we've been very, very good, very conservative with how we spend our money. I think, we go through this process every year. We look at every single warrant article. We're very prudent, and I would hope that the taxpayers would trust us enough at this point to know that we're not just, this is not because of any kind of misspending on our part or not planning correctly. It's just the reality of the
In past
situation.
years, we've looked at, hey, do we need a $150,000 override or not? And we purposely made a decision not to, but it's no longer a $150,000 item.
And when you look at our other two partners in the regional schools, Topsfield and Boxford, they both passed overrides last year. They're not, they're not sitting over there fat and happy. They're not looking at overrides again this year, but it got them through the problem that they faced in 16. And it gave them some capacity. I don't expect that they're going to be looking at overrides for, based on the conversations I've had with them for a couple of years. But it's when you have a multi-town region like we have, and one of the communities doesn't have the benefit of that override, it really sticks out. So.
And I think that, part of that, the reason why those overrides failed last year, I think we as selectmen, we have to own that. We didn't get out. We didn't do the job that we should have done to educate the public. And I think we need to do a better job this year to make people understand the reasons why we're doing it, and so that they have faith in us and trust us to handle the money appropriately.
Okay. We'll move forward based on the consensus that we see tonight. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to? I think you've done enough talking, but anything?
Yeah, I'm sure you're tired of listening to me. So,
does anybody else have any other questions before we wrap this up? Again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We value all of your input. I know that these things do not get done in a vacuum. Everybody contributes, and so I really appreciate all the hard work everybody's done to get us to this point.
Here's the Hingham Act.
Thank you very much. We motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Oh, you did, okay.
We're adjourned. Thank you.